Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Doug Brunke with Global Chamber, and we've got a really great program today. It's a Globinar on digital transformation and Industry 4.0. We've got two of the world's experts in that area, and what's kind of cool about this is that they've not only worked with big companies, but they've worked with small and medium-sized enterprises as well, and kind of the focus today is more on the SME side. You know, the good news is they're here. The bad news is 70% of these types of digital transformation projects and companies fail. That's for those of you who have been involved with IT projects and programs in the past or more recently, you know that there can be some really significant challenges in doing this. That should not disrupt your intention to do the right thing, and you need to be modern, you need to implement technology. And so what we're going to go through today with both Matthew Hoffer and Rebecca Hoffman, both of Spire Strategy, is ideas and thoughts and ways for you to implement these types of programs more strategically and more effectively. So our first speaker, I'm going to hand it over to you, Matthew. Matthew, you are a managing partner at Spire Strategy. One of the things that we've talked about with you is that you take very complicated things and boil them down into things that are much more understandable for everybody. So we'll be appreciating that as you do that today. You've lived and worked on every continent. You've got 20 years of experience in corporate strategy, finance, tech advisory, and government affairs. And that includes JP Morgan Investment Bank in London. Appreciate the fact that both of you have a great international background. You're both based in Zurich now, and so obviously a very international country and city. And so again, thank you for sharing your epiphanies and thoughts and ideas today about this important topic. Matthew, take it away.
All right, well, Doug, thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Good morning in America, good evening in Asia, and good afternoon here in Europe. Really delighted to be doing this Globinar, as you call it, I think. Doug, you said that we excel at sort of distilling complex things into something to something a bit simpler. We'll see in an hour if that's true. We'll see sort of what the feedback has been. So as I said, really, so thank you for the introduction. We'd like to also introduce, so it's Rebecca Bachmann. She's our Chief Strategy and Technology Officer at Spire Strategy. Myself, I'm the managing partner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you now a presentation. I think it'll be about 25, 30, 35 minutes or so. I'm going to be doing most of the talking just for simplicity's sake. And then Rebecca and I will be really happy to answer your questions. So to get this going, I'm first going to just stop the video and I'm going to share my screen. And okay. So Doug, can you see the screen?
I can see the top header.
Okay.
Yes, we can't see the full screen. Now we can.
There we go. Got it.
Okay, fantastic. All right, let me just minimize this. Great. All right, so again, good. Hi everyone. So for this webinar, we're going to be talking about how SMEs can extract greater value from technology and use it and how they can use that to transform their companies. So I'll jump right into it. The first thing I wanted to do, hang on a second, and somehow, okay, that works. So the first thing I want to do is just start from sort of 60,000 feet. I think a good place to start is the four industrial revolutions. The story essentially from steam to electricity to digital. It's a story that's been told many times. So I don't want to go over things that you already know, but instead I want to provide a slightly different narrative on this, and that is the narrative will be the reoccurring theme for our talk today, and that is that digital strategy and transformation is not about understanding and picking the right technology. Instead, it's about three things. The first one is developing an organizational leadership mindset. Secondly, understanding what's going on in your market. And third, understanding how the world is changing and how the different strategic opportunities, and understanding what the different strategic opportunities in your market are that may not have been available to you previously. So to highlight this, I just quickly want to go through the four industrial revolutions, and I think it'll serve up nicely when we talk about Industry 4.0. So of course, the first industrial revolution was about a transition to manufacturing and mechanization of factories through steam. And a lot of factories, they still had to be close to water, and they were constrained by design. And so once the second industrial revolution comes in, it's really about electrification. And suddenly factories, they could be built anywhere. They're much more mobile, they're bigger in size, and this of course represented a huge challenge to incumbent factories. Many of the biggest companies at the time went bust. And so the challenge here, the challenge back then, it wasn't so much, the challenge then was not the new technology, it wasn't electrification itself. The challenge was the new way of thinking, the new leadership, the new organizational design that was going to be successful. And so just like electrification back then changed everything, if we go through the third industrial revolution and the fourth one today, so just like electrification changed everything then, so digital technologies are changing everything today. And so that means that just as factory owners did 70 years ago, we need to change our thinking and our strategies today. So that's a good segue to go into Industry 4.0. and which is going to be the backdrop of our discussion today. And the fourth industrial revolution is about wider society. So Industry 4.0 is really about the effect that this is having on business. I like this infographic by Henrik von Schiele a lot. Henrik von Schiele, one of the innovators of Industry 4.0. And what he really talks about is it's the fusion of the digital, the physical, and the virtual worlds, and technologies that are being developed as a result of this, and the effect that these technologies are having on industry and therefore on business. And that's really what Industry 4.0 is. And it's clearly in this context that digital transformation for all companies is going to be absolutely critical. So if we think about digital transformation, what exactly is it? It's important to define what it isn't. I've been, sort of say this colloquially, I've been in rooms with 50 executives. You ask what digital transformation is, and you can often get 100 different answers. So we just boil it down really simply. It's often, it's important to distinguish between digital transformation versus digitization. Digitization is really doing the same thing, but adding new technologies to existing processes. As an example, take GE, right? They had market-leading processes, and when they became available, they applied new market-leading technologies to existing practices. In other words, they computerized manual processes, primarily to gain efficiencies. So things like paper forms became electronic forms, paper documents became PDFs, sales transaction logs became invoices, and they made the switch to automation and ERP. So in digitization, the underlying process, and if you just give me a second, I'm actually just going to close my email because it's right. And so in digitization, the underlying process remains the same. The underlying process remains the same, but they're digitized essentially through an analog to digital process. Now, if you look at Amazon, for example, on the other hand, and they're a great example of digital transformation, what they do is they really do digital transformation every 6 months. The transformation component embodies the ability essentially to change actual processes and competencies. And the key thing is here, you can't do it in one time. Amazon, they don't do one-time, digital transformation. It's not I hire a CTO or a CDO and in 6 months or 1 year, we're going to be fully digital. Instead, what they have designed are malleable processes that can intrinsically and substantively change to enable the company itself to change, so that it can adapt to the market when they see an opportunity. So, of course, the really good example of this is their own product to platform switch from the sort of digital reseller of books, as we used to know them, to the platform company that we know today. They open themselves up to third-party contributors, allow these users to build on top of its data layers. So when we think of misconceptions and about what digital transformation is, the most common misconception then is people think digital transformation, it's about the technology, it's about the digital. It isn't. Digital transformation is about the transformation. And the value of a new technology to a business is not about adopting the technology. It's about how technology can transform the business to improve how that business competes. So we take this down a step and say, okay, drill it down, and what does this mean in practice? Digital transformation then is really about three things. The first one is strategy. So technology, it's becoming increasingly ubiquitous, right? It's getting cheaper. A lot of the big companies like give away, for example, Google, they give away advanced AI for free, like TensorFlow. Any company, small, micro, big, can access advanced analytics through the cloud. So in that context, your point of differentiation or USP is not the tech, it's the strategy. The second pillar, and we just talked about that a bit before, is the organization. So it's really the greatest challenge or the greatest barrier or not to successfully digitally transforming. And really here it's about, reskilling your people, understanding how your processes can be digitized when they need to, innovating your business model. These are the key components about your organization. And the third pillar is data. And I'll talk a bit more about that later, but if you think about, this, 75% of data that companies hold, they do not use for any strategic purpose whatsoever. So companies, they do not take advantage of analytics because they don't have a functioning data strategy, for example. And if you don't have that, there is no way that digital transformation in your company is going to be successful. So in this context, how can companies respond? How can firms like you? How can you respond? So, of course, there is bewildering amount of disruption. How can you create winning strategies? And this really goes at the heart of creating digital strategy in Industry 4.0. And the first thing to say, and we've just been talking about this, strategy is being completely transformed by technology. And so we think of all the areas of strategy, we think that it's important to focus on 5 areas that you need to change in response in order to succeed in Industry 4.0. So the first pillar, customers. And so the question you need to be asking yourself is, how can I move closer to my customers? How can I create more customer centricity in my approach? And the heart of this is understanding that customers today have access to unrivaled information, right? They speak, they communicate with each other. Their paths to purchasing are changing. So for example, the importance of, it's important to understand that to develop things like omni-channel strategies, offline, online, that they're seamless to create a completely customized customer experience. The second pillar is data. And here the key question is, how can I turn my data into a strategic asset? And today, the key shift here has been, that data has changed from a process really to a source of value creation. And so to do that, you need to have a great data strategy. And to create the data strategy, you need to answer questions like, how will you gather data? How will you use the data? Who will use the data in your company? How can that data create value? The third pillar of strategy in Industry 4.0 is asking the question, who is my competition? Who is my competitor? Who are my competition? Now, a fundamental shift in this digital economy in Industry 4.0 has been that companies that are completely different from each other are now competing against each other. And if you think of the old way, right? Let's take the hotel industry as an example. Hotels in the past competed against hotels. Business models all basically identical. Differentiation perhaps a little bit in strategy, but the main differentiation is in the market segments perhaps that they're serving. Today, hotels not just competing against hotels, as you all know, they're competing against platform companies that own no real estate. And so the differentiation here is fundamentally that companies with completely different business models are now competing against each other. The fourth pillar of strategy in Industry 4.0 is around innovation. And the key question here is, how can I create an innovation culture of rapid prototyping? Because the key shift here is going from sort of, let's call it big bets that come from the top down to creating a culture of rapid prototyping and feedback loops. And this, of course, requires a big change in leadership and organizational mindset. And I can give two examples here. I mean, one of them is JCPenney. I think most of you are dialing in from the US. So I myself spent a number of years formerly in the US. And, if you think of JCPenney, what they did recently, and I have to say, I confess I forgot his name, but there was a gentleman who he worked at Apple. And then he was the gentleman who was responsible for creating all the Apple stores. I forgot his name, I'm sorry. And he was basically parachuted in, JCPenney, they're struggling, mid-market retailer. And he was parachuted in to kind of create, to revolutionize them and create a sort of Apple experience at JCPenney. Of course, he did exactly that. He was responsible for the Apple store, so he completely revolutionized JCPenney stores. And made them sort of much more snazzy and in that sort of Apple design, and it failed. Because, it's really sort of an example of a top-down, making big bets, and they spent a lot of money redesigning stores and it didn't work. If you contrast that to companies, and I love this example a lot, it's old, but I think it's wonderful. It's, the New York Times. In the late 90s, early 2000s, they really started to think, okay, how is this new economy, which, is this digital economy, which is really new, how is this changing? How is it changing the market? How is it changing the customers that we will need to be able to reach? How is it changing the business model? How is it changing our monetization? Who is going to buy papers, as in physical newspapers? And so what they did was rapid prototyping with their website, with the digital offering, reaching out to existing customers, giving them free trials, having feedback loops, and the result being that they really emerged as one of the few sort of old sort of traditional media or traditional newspaper companies to make money in this digital era. And the fifth component of strategy in Industry 4.0 that I want to touch upon is value. And the question here is, how do you define your value and how can you adapt to change? And of course, the fundamental question here is, the companies that you should be thinking about is, without getting too philosophical, who are we, right? So Tesla, for example, are they a car company? Are they a battery company? Are they an energy company? Are they a tech company? And this really requires a shift in thinking. The old way was very much, how will this new technology impact my business model, right? So it's sort of coming from an approach of, this is scary and we need to be defensive. The new way of thinking is much more towards, how does this new technology open up opportunities to create value for customers, for existing and new customers that was not there before? And so it's really about understanding sort of evolving over sustaining. Now, I wanted to talk a bit more about what we call the oil of the 21st century, so data. And before we talked a bit about strategy, we talked about organization, and I wanted to touch upon really the third pillar here, the third sort of key concept of digital transformation, which is around data. And how can you create or use data to become a strategic resource or derive more value for data in your company? And the first thing I want to say here is talk about the importance of collecting data from diverse sources. So first of all, as I said, important to gather diverse data. Second, it's really important to focus on things like behavioral data. So focus on what people are doing, not what they're saying. I mean, I can give an example of Netflix. What they used to do at the beginning, they used to give out surveys and said, to their customers, did you like watching this? Yes, no, or rate it out of 10. Wasn't very successful. And what they did once they had the data and were able to reformulate the data strategy, they actually then developed algorithms that focus on what people are actually clicking on, so what people are actually doing. It's an obvious example, but I think it's a good one to really understand the importance of focusing on things like behavioral data. Really important as well to combine data across silos. So silos within organizations are never good. And that's same as for data. So, from HR, from sales, from marketing, really to ensure that data, that you can create a sort of a data warehouse, which gives you one view of who your customer is. And the last one, of course, this enables you to use data as a predictive layer also in decision-making. Secondly, the types of data. there are three types of data I think that every business should be thinking about. The first one is business process data, which helps to manage and optimize risk and operations. So it's for things like sales, billing, inventory. The second one is product data or service data, helps you deliver on your core value proposition. So think of things like Google Maps, Bloomberg Terminal, weather providers. And the third one is around customer data. So to provide a complete picture, enables you to provide a complete picture of your customer and enable much more valuable interactions to improve your value proposition. So it really enables you then to focus on your customer purchases, your customer behaviors, customer demographics, the comments and the reviews that they leave behind. Third, obviously I can't talk about or be unprofessional talk about data without talking about big data. Big data is really just a different way of saying, saying unstructured data. So structured data it's planned in advance, it's an Excel sheet, it's tidy, it's neat, it's obtained via surveys. Unstructured data, i.e. big data, it's messy, it has no structure. It can come from things like social media, from images. It's not predetermined. But it is incredibly valuable. And the sources of big data, and these can be incredibly valuable to the company, are things like social media, search, mobile data. And again, mobile data, it's not just about actions, but it also can be linked to things like time and location. IoT, right? So putting sensors on things and connecting them to the internet and cloud. It's expected by 2020, 50 billion devices are going to be connected to the internet. So if you can get data from all of these, sources, and you have it backed up by a great data strategy, in other words, why you're collecting it, what you're going to do with it, then you can apply analytics to gain a real competitive advantage and derive value from the data. And when I say analytics, analytics tools like text mining, so sorting out language to tease out patterns and identify quantitative trends, distributed processing, right? Platforms like Hadoop, cognitive computing, AI, NLP, natural language processing, adaptive learning, and also now IBM is taking lead in developing quantum computing, which will be, I think, a game changer in analytics. So this is then talking now about some of the strategies that you can think about and the strategies to deploy for Industry 4.0. And so what I wanted now to do is perhaps go in a deeper dive and talk about some of the key industry shifts that we're seeing. That we're seeing, within in the digital economy, and the number of shifts. But I want to focus on what we think are two of the key shifts. And the first one is around business model innovation, which is I touched upon it a bit before. And I think one of the key shifts in one of the key facets of business model innovation within Industry 4.0 is the rise of platforms. And although we know platform companies, I think the concept itself is still, it's very much an emergent field. It's still not that well understood. I mean, you can read on the right, and I won't repeat it, but we've all seen the quote about Uber and about Alibaba and Airbnb, and they own no assets. And in a digital first economy, right? In this economy, platforms always beat products. And Sunil Gupta at HBS on the left, he sort of drew this new rules of strategy. And you see at the top, you have these platform companies, platforms beat products. And essentially that's because they enable companies to create a base layer of technology that enables the exchange of value between customers and the collection of data about these customers for your company. And I think this is interesting because, Michael Porter, in his seminal work, What is Strategy? He actually argued, I think this was in the mid-90s, and he said, look, a key pillar of successful strategy is to build high barriers to entry. However, building such barriers is really becoming harder and harder to do in today's digital first landscape. And so if you think about it, the traditional business model, right, the traditional product first business model, it sits in a linear value chain, which delivers standalone products. This has been completely disrupted. And so there are really three reasons then why platforms beat products. The first one is when you shift from a linear value chain to a platform model, you put yourself at the top of the food chain rather than being a mere component of it. The second reason is when you're at the center of this new ecosystem, you control the oil of the 21st century, right? You control the data, and specifically and importantly, you control the flow of data. And third, transforming from product to platform means that you can ensure that those companies that are currently competitors actually can become your complementors instead. Amazon is a great example of that, taking companies that others be competitors, basically putting on their platform and just taking a cut, of what they sell. So here you see, examples of pure platforms. So does that mean we need, my company now needs to become a pure platform player to succeed, otherwise I'm dead? Of course not. First of all, think of Apple, right? Apple is not a pure platform. They're a product plus platform company, obviously been very successful. Think of Nike. They were or are a product first company. They developed a platform component, and again, through IoT innovations on their shoes. So, companies that create product plus platform strategies have also been very successful. And even if I say, look, Nike, or you say, look, Nike and Apple, these are major companies, how does this apply to me? I mean, I can give you an example. One of our clients, it's a small enterprise. It's only has 10 people. They're a magazine. They write in the cargo shipping industry. So really, when you talk about SMEs, they're really on the sort of micro size. Even they were able to switch away from a pure advertising revenue model towards developing a platform component, and then having, through the app and also desktop, have customers log into the platform, their customers being ports, logistics providers, basically sharing their data. And then, through the cloud, they're able to apply analytics to serve those customers better, to know more about them, and second, also to create monetization opportunities with that data to providers on the back end who would find value in it. So the key takeaway here is this is really a strategy that is open to any company. The second thing I wanted to focus on is what we call digital DNA. And here the critical importance is about talent management, and it's really from leadership to upskilling your workforce and then making them think digital in everything they do, ensuring a true digital DNA across your organization that is then reflected in your products and services. So again, I think most of you in America, that's I'm sure you guessed it, that's a picture of the Met, the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Some of the things that they did, obvious and less obvious. Some of the obvious things they did, they developed a great mobile app in order to help customers and people who can't get to America to experience their content. And some of the less obvious things they did, they were able to create a new sort of mobile and video experience to tell the story from acquisition to display, which takes 6 months apparently. And they were able to video that and create a completely new way of integrating art and for people to experience art. And they did other things like create gaming experiences for younger audiences. So when you come in, you have to sort of go from room to room, and there are clues, and you have to obviously read the art and internalize what's going on in order to get to the next clue. And so and Met employees, they're part of when you arrive there, they facilitate this. And so in that way, what the Met did is they also thought out of the box a bit. And okay, our competition is not just other museums, but even Candy Crush, for example, right? Or even to less extent Netflix. So it's not just museum about being in competition. It's really going much broader than that. The second example that we like a lot is other airlines are doing this. I think British Airways have done it best. So company a bit closer to home. What they've done is, again, I talked earlier about having data across silos. They realized, okay, we have diverse data. So what they did is they created a data warehouse to get a single view of each customer. And then this digital DNA part, they put that down literally to the cabin crew inside the aircraft, where that data is then linked and accessible by cabin crew on an iPad, so that they can, customers that are, for example, part of a loyalty program, when those customers board the aircraft, the cabin crew already understand, they already know in advance, Mr. Smith, he has a fear of flying, or they know what his needs and preferences are, and they're much more able to serve him much more personally. And then after the flight, they then input back into the, in their iPad, any additional information on Mr. Smith, and his preferences after the flight that will enable the next cabin crew in his next flight to serve him better. So if we think about enabling transformation in your company, how can you do that? So there are a number of ways. There's obviously a lot of support out there for companies trying to undertake digital transformation. One way, of course, is to work with large consulting companies. And this is really, I think, really valuable for larger enterprises and or companies that have very specific problems that require deep industry expertise. There are also, things like what we call self-help books. So sort of, they can provide a lot of great foundational knowledge with really good case studies. And we think sort of beyond that, a lot of these solutions, however, they're not ideal for companies. And this is something that we ourselves, we have seen in the work that we've done. And so we thought to ourselves, in what areas are existing market solutions for digital transformation lacking? And in our work, whilst business leaders, they say repeatedly, look, digital transformation is, the number one issue I'm concerned about. What I'm also concerned about are costs. Right? I don't want to pay astronomical consulting fees. I'm also concerned about personalization. I don't want just copy and paste solution. Concerned about privacy. Don't want to be invaded by an army of consultants. Speed. Don't want to wait weeks or months for a diagnosis on what's, where the issues are in my company. Convenience. Prefer to have a solution that is not necessarily fixed to a time and a place. So what we've tried to figure out is, when we think about enabling transformation in your company, how can we how could we integrate a lot of this feedback into a product that is able to deliver on some of these concerns. And so the first thing we did, we've talked a bit about here about this, the strategy data organization approach, is develop a methodology in response. And this is something that we actively use in our client projects. And so the first thing to say is, before talking about the methodology, it's really about the approach, right? And so again, digital transformation, it's not about the digital, it's about the transformation. So we work our way backwards. Technology is only as good as your data. Data is only as good as a data strategy, which is only as good as your business model, which is only as good as your strategy. And so if you think of this approach, the methodology that we then developed in response to this, it's what we call the transformation value chain. And so, and as I said, this is something that we actively use on our client work. And so it really revolves around the three pillars. So the first one is strategy. It's understanding, what is your USP? What is your key point of differentiation? The second thing that's really important to look at is, as I mentioned, your organization. So really understanding, what does your business model look like? What do your processes look like? What about your people skills? And again, all of this, the transformation value chain, it's really saying, how can you build your own personalized digital transformation journey that is unique to you? Of course, innovation is a key component. We talked about that as well. Ideation is 1%, the execution is the 99%. And then the third pillar, which we talked about, is about data. So what we do is we then say, after the strategy, after the organization, we then come and we try to understand what is going on in your data. Do you have a data strategy? How do you use data, and so on? And only at the last point, do we then begin talking about advanced digital technologies and understand how you use those. So with what I'm going to do now, I just wanted to give you a very quick demo of the solution that we've built. And I like, I have a picture of a sniper here. So as I said, what we've done is we've digitized the aforementioned methodology. And I just wanted to say a few words, about sort of what it is. And of course, there is so much uncertainty about, what metrics and attributions can be directly linked to the success or failure of digital transformation products. For example, what causes correlation, what's causation. And so what our tool, what it does, it addresses, as I mentioned, the aforementioned issues such as cost sensitivity, privacy, speed, convenience, personalization, really to create a sniper's approach to enable us to find out what the true underlying issues are for a company in its transformation journey, and then to respond with a very targeted hypothesis to what we see going on. So what the tool does, and I'll just switch now and I'll give you a demo of it. As I mentioned, it applies a strategy-first approach. It's minimally intrusive, so it's something that you can implement anywhere. Sunday evening on the couch. It's designed to assess your transformation capacity in this very holistic manner, and it delivers the results in 48 hours. So it gives you that speed. And so the way it works is it's an online assessment. It doesn't have to be integrated into your company. It's something, we send you a link, you can just click on it. Our suggestion is always that 5 to 15 people within your organization will take it, but ultimately that's also up to you. And then it tells you in a really targeted way what the issues are. So I'm just going to switch now to the demo. So this is how this is the tool that we've developed, as I just mentioned. So some of the key features here, there are different response methods. On the left here, you can see the methodology that I talked about. So this is the methodology that we've developed. As I mentioned, there are different response methods. Some of the questions are multiple choice. Some of them have slider features. Some of them, single answer questions. And the key purpose here is, as I mentioned, it's to gain, you're the ones who have the expertise, not us. So it's about gaining qualitative information and then transforming these into quantitative data points. You can also track your progress up here through a dashboard. And at the bottom here, we have a confidence level tracker to measure also how confident you are in your responses, which is really important. It's really valuable, we found, to feed that back. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like. For every question, we collect 8 to 12 data points. So these include the response type, they include the time to answer, they include, as I mentioned, the confidence level. They include things like your responses within each of these 3 pillars. So the strategy, the organization, and your data and technology. And we have also cross-cutting thematic outputs that I'll show you a little bit in a second. And then also, as you can see here, we also have natural language input. Some of the questions are completely customized, such as this one. So what we do is we work with you before, we have a conversation to understand what your context is. And then every one of these assessments is customized to a degree, depending on what type of company you are, depending on what industry you're in. And then I'll just show you the last. I just wanted to show you one about the technology as well. And as you can see on the left here, as this progresses, each of these icons light up, so it gives you a map based on the methodology where you are. And as I mentioned, there is there can be a high degree of customization for each assessment. And some of the questions, particularly around advanced digital technologies, these questions are completely customized based on you. So this is just a standard example where we list what functions your company will have, and then within that, what the type of technologies that you're likely to use. And then these things you can click and you'll see the response come up here. So once you click submit, this is then the output that we gift you. It's within 48 hours. And that we're able to turn it around. So this is a report that we did for a client. So it's your company here, digital valuation report. And so it starts with the contents page, then it gives you the executive summary, and then it measures 4 things. And it's really about the simplicity with which the information is displayed. So the first thing that we measure is your transformation capacity. And again, really important information. It gives you a sense of, on this transformation axis, where you're located. Are you, really strong on strategy, strong on technology, strong on both? We plot you on this. We have about 1,000 different data points, ways that we can plot you on this axis. So it's not just 4, and that's also because of the color coding as well. So it can be sort of lighter or darker depending on the extent to which you're entrenched in one of these quadrants, where you are, and what to do to become a transformation master. The second thing that we measure, and again, this is the model doing it, it's your transformation capacity across your strategy, organization, and technology. So it's really understanding, your strategy, how you score across the organization and technology. And the value here is just for you to understand at a very high level and very quickly where some of the, let's call it weaknesses or areas for improvement, areas you should be focusing on. And it gives you, really information across your whole company. We then give you more of a deep dive into these 3 pillars, into what they mean. And then the third thing that that the model will tell you is also, these are some of the cross-cutting themes that I talked about. So it'll give you information on your innovation capacity, on what decision-making in your company looks like. Also things like process malleability, which is really, really important for digital transformation. We tell you a bit about what these thematic results mean. And then finally, we have our analyst assessment, and this is also why it takes 48 hours. It's 0% tech, 100% human, and this is where we come in and we actually analyze all of the natural language inputs that you have provided. We synthesize them, and we also provide some advisory, some benchmarking, and give you, produce this in a report format. And finally, this is typically can also serve as the first step to sort of help you pinpoint where you are on your transformation journey, how transformative you are, what the next steps are, how you should be, thinking about how you are competing essentially in Industry 4.0. And then we provide at the end a suggested roadmap as well on what the potential next steps are. And this is then always followed by a follow-up call, which we have. So we also have lots of questions on this, and then and to discuss any aspect of the report. And finally, the output that we show you as well. It's we recap all of the questions that were asked, and we give you in green, yellow, blue, and this is the confidence level. So this will tell you how confident each of your employees were in answering the questions. In fact, it's amalgamated across your organization, so it's anonymized, but it's it gives you valuable information as to for each of the question, how confident your people were, and it again gives you really good information. For example, if you ask him to what extent was digital a key factor in creating your strategy, if your workforce are not very confident that they know the answer, this is again really valuable information. Right. So Doug, I've been let me put the video back on. Right, so I've been there now 40 minutes. So I'll let's say pause there. Rebecca, I don't know if there's anything you want to add at this point, but I think we have 60 minutes, so it's about 2/3 of the way through. So happy to leave a third for Q&A from the participants.
Okay, very good. Rebecca, did you want to add anything? You are on mute right now, but you've seen all of this. You've been involved with clients obviously before. There's IT and there's strategy and all of this kind of mixing in. It must be a very interesting process to go through.
It is. It's very rewarding to sit right between the people who program it and the people who actually deploy it in the field. I guess one thing that I would add to it is what Matthew just showed with the different bars, the blue, red, and green. There's actually a small amendment to that. We actually show, it is still anonymized, but we actually show, based on everybody who takes the assessment, the individual confidence level. So let's say you have 10 people who take it and 5 of them are fully confident, 2 of them are somewhat confident, and 3 of them are unsure. You will actually have the representative percentage in terms of their confidence level. This is something that we received feedback on from previous clients, and so that's just a small thing that we've now changed and incorporated. But I do see that there are 2 questions, so how about we jump right in and answer the questions. So let me just pull these up. Since transformation is really about changing strategy and ways of working, how does your methodology enroll the people of the organization? So thank you, Stephanie, for that question. So I should probably say, or we should probably say, that the tool is the #1 step in what we do. So far, we've had a conversion rate of 100% in terms of who's taken the tool and who then wanted to continue with us. We like to think of it in 3 parts. So part #1 is sort of honing in on what needs to be done, what are the main opportunities, what are the main challenges that we see within that organization. How can we then, instead of sending in 20 consultants for a month, send in 5 experts for a week to test our hypothesis? And then based on that, we can then ultimately give the expertise that we can as Spire strategy. And ultimately, if we then get to a point where execution capabilities are required, we either work with one of our partner companies, or we will sometimes also work with the Big 4 or anybody else. Of course, we see a huge, well, the main crucial aspect of successfully creating and deploying this tool in the follow-on work that then comes afterwards. Matthew said we try to bring in, I think, 5 to 15, that's the number he mentioned, people to answer this tool. Personally, I'm more of a proponent of saying I prefer to have 20 or 25, then again, it depends on the size of the organization, obviously. But from the get-go, involving them in the transformation, having their honest opinion, knowing that it's anonymized and their boss won't actually know who, was it Ms. Taylor and Mr. Smith who answered this particular thing on this particular question. That's not an issue that needs to be there. So they really get to be honest, and they get to respond with natural language, and we can amalgamate that and then send that back. And then ultimately, knowing also having that information on the back end, we can then also go in and also have a much more open discussion with them and really bring in the individuals within the organization. I hope that answers your question.
Matthew, do you want to add to that, or?
No, I think Rebecca, hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
One of the key facets, of course, it is afterwards, in the advisory phase. This is a great diagnostics tool, and it can serve, 2 purposes, right? On the one hand, it gives a company great insights into where they are in their own transformation journey, and sort of how thinking, sort of more holistically about how they can and should be competing. And second, it's really about, as Stephanie then also, asks about creating a roadmap that really, solves for the identified issues. And as part of that, I talked a bit about some of the, larger consulting companies, as Rebecca mentioned. These very much can also become our partners, and particularly towards the end of the advisory phase, but also on the phase 3 then about the, when it comes to execution. We then at that point, we're not the sort of IT specialists, and then, then it's really about bringing in, people. We work with, partners of ours that, individuals who are, former CIOs and heads of digital transformation for quite large companies, and people who, have been integrating IT projects for 30 years and love doing that. And so these are then, some of the partners who we'd also work with, when it comes to the execution phase.
Gotcha. Stephanie, by the way, she's a superstar in implementing IT projects. That's how she spent her career. And now she's living on an island, literally on an island, and she's doing some amazing work for member companies for Global Chamber. So she's amazing in terms of what her capabilities are. I think you covered the second question, right? Rebecca, did you want to add anything to the second question?
No, I think Matthew covered it.
We kind of jumped to the end of the process. There's a lot of components on the front end. So another question that we've gotten in from the group here is regarding where do you get the input from? Who are these people within the organization? Is it distributed across the management team and other parts? How deep in the organization do you go? What kind of feedback and information do you want, and how deep from an organization typically?
So it depends. We do like people from leadership, HR, and IT at the very least, but we also want a representation of people who engage in everyday processes, because processes are such a big part, people skills, talent management, that's such a huge component of whether or not a company has a digital DNA and what the culture is all about, and if there are any hindrances to transforming simply based on, let's say, the external structure and the environment that the organization exists in. We do let the project owner nominate the people. We do like to have CEO, CTO, CDO, head of HR, head of IT. We then would like, let's say it's a product company first, so let's say something in the manufacturing space. You have R&D departments, which are usually very important around innovation, ideation, and so forth. So we want a senior member there, but also 2 or 3 individuals who are mid-management, or even, let's say, somebody who only joined the company 2 or 3 years ago. That's also a good representation. We generally can see who the people are, and we can, within Spire, actually also, so in the back end, we have artificial intelligence, and we can obviously see the anomalies, right? So having a broad spectrum of people who actually do it, just to see whether or not leadership is completely disconnected from other functions within the organization, is another data point that, for instance, we connect. In the back end, it's really neat. It's also why I absolutely love doing this. It's so remarkable what we can do with machine learning, in terms of with every new record that we add, we can actually see this. And as part of that, this is also maybe why I have the opinion to say the more the merrier, right? We want people to, within an organization, fill it in from all kinds of functions, so that we really have a representation that we believe can give us the insight that we can then present to the leadership.
Okay. 70% failure for these types of programs outside of what you guys do is pretty shocking, you know, in terms of the wasted money that goes. What are some of the key elements that, kind of from an overview, that you are able to address to get the success rate much higher?
So I suppose what we do, first of all, is we will be very honest about whether or not we believe we can help. And if not, chances are we either have a partner company, or we can get access to somebody else who can help. So there are obviously companies that are very specific in what they do. Let's say there was a biochemical company right here in Switzerland that asked us to do an assessment for them. And it turned out we did give them insights, and they did want to continue with us. However, at this point, we could simply say, look, there are very, very specific targeted issues that you have. I think it's much better for you to, you know, to have somebody who can then help you in a more subject specific area. I mean, Matthew, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I mean, I think, Doug, you know, the key aspect here is really about, you know, it's about the holistic methodology, and then the model that's underlying it. And you know, when we to bring these, I mean, why do digital transformation projects fail? Why is there such a high failure rate? You know, if you were to boil that down into one sentence, it's they're not led by strategy. They tend to be either tech first approach, or, you know, sort of very bit part. And what we've, you know, the methodology that we've come up with and that we've digitized, it's really been with that in mind. I mean, we have done, you know, projects in you know, we've done strategy projects, we've done organizational design projects, we've done business model innovation projects. And so this then was, you know, sort of came together in a, I don't want to call it a eureka moment, but I thought, well, you know, I think we can, you know, we put them together. I think we might have something that can address some of these, you know, factors, you know, success factors. And I think, so what we do then to really reduce that failure rate is saying, well, first of all, let's really understand, not thinking about the tech, but you know, let's go right to the heart of the issues of why digital transformation fails. So it's strategy, it's what's going on in your organization, it's your data. And we really understand what's going on there. And then through the assessment, we can, you know, very sort of pointedly say, look, here are the issues we found. And as a result of that, through that sort of very targeted approach, because we already know where the issues are, that's then what we can apply, you know, some advisory on to fix those.
I see. Let us know, by the way, Stephanie, if we answered your question, and then happy to connect you guys afterwards as well. Another question in from Indira Jeffrey. This is a great platform. I believe it can benefit many companies that are looking to convert to Industry 4.0. Is the platform for any kind of company, or do you recommend your platform for a specific sector or industry?
Too specific? No, sorry, you go ahead.
No. It's look, I mean, it's really for any company. Can say colloquially, any company that wants to digitally transform and is using advanced digital technologies. In terms of, specifically the sectors, I mean, and I don't quite know in the US sort of what the terminology is, but the ideal sectors for us are really within what we call, at least in Europe, the second and third sectors. So this will be things like, manufacturing, services, energy, these types of companies where, they're so these will be the ideal. This is sort of the ideal clientele, and also there is an element about the size of the company. Ideally, the company would have sort of 40 to 50 people minimum, and then going up from that, perhaps up to about sort of 2,500, and that's typically within those sectors and with that type size of company. This model tends to work very, very well. If it gets bigger than that, then it works better within a division of a company. So this will be the sort of sectors and the size of the company where the tool really comes into its own.
Yeah, and I think I'd add to that also consumer goods.
Yeah.
Okay. Manufacturing, services, energy, consumer goods. It sounds. How about healthcare? Is that?
Healthcare, to the extent that we don't have on staff the capabilities to deal with nanotechnology or highly specialized biochemical processes.
Okay.
So the tool was developed as a very general sort of first stop tool to get the lights, to switch the lights on, to say, okay, we come to you, we know things are going on in our industry, we have challenges, we want to compete in the long term. Highlight for us in a minimally invasive way what we could do. Or alternatively, we have a particular kind of idea that we would like to follow through on, and can you verify and test whether or not that would be a good idea? I mean, that's maybe also to address your question before, Doug, it is also such an issue that we verify those plans that they have. As in, let's say UBS, very close to home, they spent 25 million on a project that is essentially a technology that's then just been benched. They spent it on something that the consumers don't require, the end consumer. They spent it on something that's not being used internally. And for UBS, 25 million francs is not that much, but for a small company, obviously you want to maximize your efforts in every respect. And so for us to be able to come in and say, look, based on our best determination at this point, your company, your organization is not ready for it, and we can pinpoint exactly why that is. It is cumbersome processes. It is, the fact that, you have a disillusioned workforce because they feel like their ideas not taken seriously or not heard. All of these things, they can be shown based on the insights that we have and based on the tool that we deploy. So that's also a good way for us to then give the feedback to a company to say, hey, you know what, make certain changes in your company. It may only take 3 months or so, and then embark on integrating, this technology that may then ultimately help you change your business model, or is the first step towards turning you into a platform business model.
Okay, sounds good. I think we've got time for one more question, and this one comes in from Janet Gronenfelder, who I think actually is based in the U.S., but she has experience in Switzerland, knowing her. How do you address the human element in these types of transformations? I've experienced the following, that people will be on board and midstream are overwhelmed and don't understand the value and potentially block an outcome. So it's somewhat related to the first question. You've touched on the personal side of things. How do you overcome making sure that everybody's kind of moving forward at every stage?
I think Rebecca, you'd be.
Sure, of course. Well, I mean, my background is actually, one of my degrees is in psychology, right? So one of the things, you look at a 70% failure rate in digital transformation projects, and we all know that 90% of those high failures are really down to the people. So, you know, that's not a big secret. So how do you keep them engaged? It was a key guideline that we actually tried to focus on when creating the methodology, and then ultimately also digitizing the methodology. Now, anything that's digital is less personalized, but at the same time, of course, it doesn't make sense to just go in and talk to all of these people. We need to gather the data. You can learn a lot from data, and then ultimately, of course, you can come in the second stage and then ask specific people about specific things. But trust is obviously a big thing. And so in designing this tool and coming up with the methodology, we did want to get all of the insights from the people. We wanted to get them involved. We do tend to ask the project owner to encourage other people to volunteer for it. As in, if we have a company, a client that we work for with, let's say, 500 employees or so, right? If 100 of those people will do the assessment, then sure, that's 1.5 hours worth of time from 100 people. So that's not nothing. But at the same time, if it's a company that, you know, is fairly well run, then 90 minutes of time is not really that much for a CEO to stomach, especially if the output is then something that gives you a holistic idea of where the company is at. So ultimately, we bring the people in from the get-go. We foster a dialogue as much as that's feasible within the initial snapshot that we take. And then ultimately, in a second stage, we then sort of double click on the particular individuals where we feel like they've been very active in terms of the natural language inputs. They've been very honest. They show a great insight, both in terms of the thematic depth of what they have shared with us. They spend an appropriate amount answering the questions. They've taken it seriously. And there are so many factors that you can basically measure. And then you can also go to, let's say, a champion. And that champion may not be the head of HR. That champion may actually be somebody working in the HR department, but somebody who has great ideas. Then we can have a one-on-one conversation and a follow-on engagement with them, whether that's via Skype, whether that's in person, and so forth. And in a lot of ways, without actually abusing their trust and saying, hey, you know, Ms. Taylor, we're going to tell your CEO that you're the one who's basically been, you know, criticizing the leadership, which we won't do. And that's also a very clear thing, that we don't tell the CEO, look, we're going to give you a list of everybody's responses. We don't do that. We can then still capitalize on the insights that have been shared with us.
Very good. Yeah, we do have more questions, so we're going to save that for the blog post. And Matthew, I know you've got a summary coming, and so we will likely then get this video and also the summary and addressing any other questions that folks have over the next couple days. So if we didn't get to your question, please send that in and to info@globalchamber.org and watch for the blog post in the next several days. Really want to thank both of you. This has been a great conversation, Rebecca and Matthew both. I think this is something that a lot of our members don't necessarily think of first, you know, in a lot of the daily types of activities, and being strategic is just so key, and bringing this all in together is so essential to competing in today's world. And I think you've done a really good job of articulating that and sharing a great way to go about doing it. So thank you both. Thanks for being members of Global Chamber. Thank you everybody for participating today, and we'll be in touch soon. Watch for our weekly Globinars. Next week we're talking about NAFTA and USMCA, immigration and border issues related to business in the United States, and we have all sorts of other things coming up. In fact, I think we have 3 or 4 Globinars next week in a variety of ways, including one on Europe on Tuesday. The one I just mentioned, I believe, is Wednesday, and then Thursday is what's hot around the world, June 6th. What's hot around the world? And we have leaders from all over the world talking about the cannabis market and other market opportunities that you might be interested in. So thank you very much again. Any last words, last comments that you'd like to make, something maybe that you haven't said yet, or something you'd like to reinforce to the audience?
No, I mean, well, just thank you very much, Doug. Concur with your concluding thoughts, and it's been a great privilege to present. Thank you for the opportunity, and yeah, we're excited to see what's ahead.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And again, if you need to get a hold of the speakers, jump into the directory and find them, or obviously send something to us, info@globalchamber.org, and happy to connect you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.